2023 is officially here, meaning another year of Inter Miami football is just around the corner. Hello everyone, welcome back after an off-season to Miami Total Football Radio, where the beautiful game meets passion and analysis. This is an Inter Miami focused podcast providing you all the latest news, updates, analysis, opinions, inside information, general punditry, and much, much more on the team. We have been listened to in more than 50 countries and counting. My name is Franco Panizo. I am one of your usual 4 co-hosts. And on this return episode, there's 3 of us. Also joining me are the beloved Steve El Primo Brenner and Jose Armando, a.k.a. Island Jose. Guys, let's just get right into it because we've been gone for a good bit. We said we would have a World Cup podcast, and then that fell through just because our schedules couldn't align. We have a lot to catch up on, clearly, not only with regards to Inter Miami, just the overall offseason, what we've been doing, what we've been up to. So we'll start with Steve El Primo. Steve, how are you doing? Welcome back. Ready for another year? And what have you been up to for the last few weeks?
Thank you, mate. Yeah, great to be back. I hope everyone's been well. Well, we were immersed in the, seems like ages ago now, but in the World Cup, which was obviously great. If you look away from the migrant deaths and all the controversy away from Qatar, the actual football on the pitch was really good. There were some amazing games. We all met up, watched the England game, which I still was gutted that we still didn't win, that penalty that Harry Kane missed. But yeah, it was nice just to, I really enjoyed the World Cup. I think my wife enjoyed it so much, or my daughter, who kept threatening to rip down my wall chart every 5 minutes, and then she actually did rip it down in the morning of the final. But I thought that it was a great tournament football-wise, and definitely the final, I don't know what you guys think, but I think that was one of the best games I think I've ever seen. It was just ridiculous drama, and the way that France could have won it right at the end when Martinez made the save with his legs. It was just an amazing game. Good to see Lionel, Miami's favourite son, lift the trophy after all that. I think he did. It was deserved in the end, but it was an amazing match, amazing final.
The final was amazing. I don't know if it's too early in the year to have our first heated debate, so I will save it, but I don't know if the level of the overall football over the course of the tournament was that high, but we can talk about that later. Jose, how are you doing, my friend? How have the last few weeks been treating you? How did you ring in the new year? And did you enjoy the overall experience of having the Miami Total Football Radio Gang, including Andrea Llanes, Ajicita, who's not here on this week's pod, but having the 4 of us at that pub in Hollywood and seeing Steve go through all the emotions from ecstasy to despair?
Yeah, well, first off, it's good to be back, but yes, I did enjoy that a lot. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I think, at some point we were all rooting for England, and Harry Kane didn't come through with the penalty, which, was very unfortunate. At the time, since I was rooting for Argentina to win the World Cup, I thought, man, this is great. England will win this game, and the path will be a lot easier for Argentina. So I have to admit I was rooting for England, but just because I wanted Messi to lift the trophy. In the end, it did work out for me. Unfortunately, not for Steve. But in off-season, I think so far so good. I am ready to go in this pod because I think in Inter Miami in 2023, it's going to be something to talk about every single week, and I think we're just about ready to get this thing going, and it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, preseason is right around the corner. Physicals are set to happen on Friday, so January 6th, and then preseason training practice begins in earnest on January 9th, so next Monday. Jose, I don't know how you could say we were all rooting for England. I was not rooting for England at any point in that game. No, I wasn't. I was no. At the end, I was trying to get El Primo. El Primo was ramped up. He had a few beers. He was happy. He was ecstatic. I wasn't trying to rain on his parade, but I at no point was like, oh, I want to see England win this game. And actually, Steve and I, and he can
disgraceful.
Steve and I can talk about this later on in the pod, maybe at the end in the final moment. Steve and I had a very long, heated debate. We should have had a microphone and just recorded a podcast right then and there about if England's a little overrated or not, just generally speaking. But we'll save that for later on. Look, it was an interesting offseason because, like you guys said, while MLS was out of action, there was this very big tournament played in the middle of the winter, or the fall-winter, which is not normally the case. So we had a World Cup at a different time of year. So we stayed busy. We stayed busy watching football. We stayed busy talking about football. So also had the holidays, of course, which just recently came to a close. I've actually run into some Miami Total Football Radio listeners over the course of this winter. One at Buffalo Wild Wings, another one out at the Wharf in Fort Lauderdale. So just different listeners who have had plenty to say about the show, about the personalities. So, it's been great to meet some of you just out and about in South Florida. Hope that continues as 2023 rolls along. But speaking of 2023, we have a good bit to talk about. And one of my New Year's resolutions, one of my Miami Total Futbol Radio resolutions is to make the podcast back to 1 hour or so range. Because we had been going pretty long there at the end of 22, even for more than half of 22. We were going an hour and 30, an hour and 40, and while I do appreciate deep dives, I want to try to condense the podcast a little bit more and make it a little bit shorter so it's not such a time-consuming experience for the listeners. So we're going to try our best to get it to an hour. So I will leave it at that. We've got a lot to talk about. A lot. We're going to do a quick recap of the off-season for Inter Miami. We will break down what we know so far about the preseason and the roster. We are going to talk in pretty good detail about Steve Brenner's favorite player, Rodolfo Pizarro, and his situation with Inter Miami heading into this preseason and heading into this campaign. So, got a lot to talk about. Blaise Matuidi retiring. We've got a lot. We'll sprinkle it all in there as well. And we're going to do it in less than an hour. So, guys, let's get to it. All right, guys. So, Inter Miami's offseason came and went, essentially, because preseason is about to start. So quickly just run down some of the moves. Jake LaCava is in. Indiana Vassilev is out. Inter Miami signed another academy player in. Benjamin Cremachi, Argentine youth international, local, got a lot of promise. The team is pretty high on him. They also drafted 2 players in the 2023 MLS draft, which took place in 2022, but they were first round draft pick goalkeeper Cole Jensen and second round pick from UNC Wilmington midfielder Bashir Ndiaye. So, preseason starts in a few days. There's friendlies already lined up against Vasco da Gama at the latter half of January at Drive Pink Stadium. There's a friendly against FIU. There's also one against expansion MLS side St. Louis City, and also one against the New England Revolution. There are also 3 other friendlies planned. 6 in total will be in South Florida. One of those against a TBD opponent will be played in Sarasota. But Inter Miami staying local. They're staying in South Florida for much of their preseason, and they're staying in Florida for all of it. So they're not heading anywhere. Anything really of note that you want to sink your teeth into out of all those talking points, fellas? We'll start this time with Jose.
Well, I just think it makes sense for Inter Miami to take advantage of, being based in South Florida. I mean, there are so many teams that try to come down here or they go to Arizona, teams in the West Coast. I think if you have everything that you need down here, then why move around? And I think you always need like that small trip, I can't remember exactly how long is it going to be, but I know it's at least like a mini camp in Sarasota. So I think that's needed just, to build some of the chemistry within the new guys that will be coming in. So that's necessary at some point. They will do that. But for most of the time, they're going to be here in South Florida. And I think it's great. I'm really, really looking forward to that match against Vasco da Gama. I think that's a nice tradition as well. They did it last year against Universitario, your favorite team in Peru. Um, so, uh,
What?
so yeah, I think it's a nice tradition to play an international match to get things going. Yeah, I think everything looks good so far. Of course, the most important thing is to stay away from injuries, to manage the load of the players the right way, to build some chemistry. Those are the things that obviously the head coach and the entire coaching staff will be looking at. But from the outside, I think it's just great to have everything so well set up here in South Florida that you're able to stay for the entire preseason here.
So you touched on some interesting points, and before I dive into one of them, I will share an anecdote with the listeners, because you mentioned Universitario de Deportes, the Peruvian side that came and played last year for a friendly in January. By the way, it can't be a tradition if it's only been 2 years, okay? Like, tradition would have to be established much further down the road. I don't know if you can call it a tradition after 2 years. Anyway, so we were in the press box before that game in Miami versus Universitario de Deportes, and Jorge Mas walked in for a little bit, said hello, popped in, smiled, and then he jokingly said, "Oh yeah, we scheduled this for you, Franco," and laughed about it because obviously I'm of Peruvian descent. My dad was a big Universitario de Deportes fan, so nice little anecdote, nice little exchange there with Jorge Mas in preseason when the pressure is low, things are just starting to ramp back up. So that's the first part of that. Second part of that, Jose, is, and I'll go back to you here, how important or how insignificant is it that, like you just mentioned, they will only have one little road trip, essentially, where the team will be together in a hotel, bonding with the new players. I mean, a lot of the roster that's in place as of today is the same one that we saw a year ago. There haven't been a whole lot of changes. Clearly, they're sticking with the core group that they've built and that foundation that they've established, but there are new faces coming in. You have to imagine there will be more on the way, which we'll dive into in a little bit. Steve has some nuggets there. Is it important or is it insignificant that the team will spend a lot of time in South Florida, where I have to imagine they're not going to be all be staying in a hotel? They'll be going to and from training, and then they'll all go home to their respective families or their respective homes, apartments, houses, wherever, and they won't be as together as some of these other teams that will be taking road trips to a different state, and having that team bonding or that team building experience.
Well, because of the number of players that are coming back, I think, some of the chemistry is there. You obviously want to get the right mind of the group during preseason because, it's a very important part of what your goals are for the rest of the year. If you don't have a good preseason, then it's going to be hard for you to achieve everything that you have set on the board. And so I don't think it's completely necessary at this point for this team because the turnover is not as big. So, a small trip, I think that's good. Obviously, with the players being in South Florida, you give them an opportunity as well to be with their family. It's a long season, and it's important for them to have family time, even though you're just coming off vacation, off season. It's not about putting that much stress within the group of players. So give them an opportunity to stay at home, small trip. I think that's perfect.
Steve, clearly, like we've all just said, continuity has been stressed, not change, especially when it comes to the roster. For you, given how the team did last year, they finished in 6th place like you had predicted. They made the playoffs, got knocked out in the first round pretty convincingly. They've lost one designated player in Gonzalo Higuain, who is now officially retired. I won't say they let another one go, but another one is out of contract, and Alejandro Pozuelo. Rodolfo Pizarro is back on Inter Miami's roster after his loan expired down in Mexico. So right now they have one DP slot filled. And we can dive into Pizarro in a little more detail later on. But the point is, there haven't been a whole lot of changes. What do you make of the roster as of today? surely there have to be more reinforcements on the way. Surely.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you got to take the time into factor as well. Time of year right now. I mean, the World Cup has just finished, really. So there wasn't, there hasn't been any movement in terms of player recruitment, stuff like that. We just had the new year, so I think now you're going to see, definitely in the next 6 weeks, you're going to see some action. Yeah, they're going to have to make some calls. But I mean, the thing with Pizarro is that I think they kind of knew that he was going to be coming back. I don't think they banked on automatically just having another slot taken. Yeah, I'm sure if Monterrey or someone else wanted to take them off their hands, then I'm sure they would have absolutely been delighted. But they haven't. So it's frustrating for them. But I don't think they were planning for life, necessarily without him, because they feared he was going to come back anyway. So they've got to make a move. They need to replace Higuain. If that's the task, isn't it?
So should we just dive into Pizarro's situation, Jose, or should we save it for a little bit later? What do you think? What are your thoughts? Should we just go right into it?
Let's go for it. Yeah.
All right. So let's explain this in a little more detail. So Pizarro is on loan, on a season-long loan for all of 2022. That loan had an option to buy. Monterrey did not trigger that option to buy. So as a result, Pizarro, who is still under contract with Inter Miami, is back on the South Florida side's roster for 2023. Now, if you remember, at the end of the season press conference that Chris Henderson held, or at least the one he held before Phil Neville spoke, he said that there were talks ongoing, which Jose and I clearly interpreted as Inter Miami does not want Pizarro, and they do not necessarily want to bring him back. Obviously, they loaned him out because he didn't produce at a DP level in 2021 under Phil Neville in Phil Neville's first season in charge. Jose, if he's back on the roster, how do you see it all playing out, one? And two, how do you go about it if you're Phil Neville?
Right, it's a horrible situation. It's a horrible situation because I'm sure Pizarro is very well aware of that press conference that happened at the end of last season. I also think there's some sort of pride in this situation, in the sense that Rodolfo Pizarro is not going to give anything away. He is under contract and he wants to get paid, I'm sure. So it's a very difficult situation. It comes down to, okay, if they're not able to find a team for him, if nobody wants to pick him up, then what is the coaching staff going to do? Is this going to be a Blaise Matuidi situation where he becomes an ambassador, or he just, doesn't play for the year, or do you find a way to get something out of him? Pizarro is still a young player. I mean, I completely understand that.
Whoa! I have to cut you off. How can you call him a young player? You gave me stick last year for saying Robbie Robinson was a young player. Pizarro is 28. There's no way you can call him a young player after what you said to me last year.
Maybe I should have rephrased that or said a different word. But what I mean is, he's not Gonzalo Higuain or Blaise Matuidi, right? In the sense that Blaise was comfortable with not playing and retiring after getting his money. Pizarro most likely is not comfortable with that. He wants to play. He's in a situation where he's not playing at a high level. The expectations around him when he signed for Inter Miami were completely different. Remember, we were talking, okay, he's probably going to be here for a year before he goes to a big club. That didn't happen, obviously. And, at this point, I'm sure Pizarro wants to get back to a high level. And for that, he needs to play. So, I think for the coaching staff, it's about making that decision, getting that conversation through with the player, if he's not able to go. But, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy at all because, things have been said and everything is on record. I think the receipts are there for both sides. And I just think it wouldn't be ideal for both sides if we have another Blaise Matuidi situation. I think if Pizarro stays at Inter Miami, he needs to be a part of a plan.
So if they cannot transfer him on, or they can't loan him out, or find a way to move him on, and he's still on the roster as a DP. Because, Steve, you have some information there as to what Inter Miami is looking for, price-wise, for Pizarro and any deal that they're trying to make? How much is Inter Miami looking for in a transfer for Pizarro?
Yeah, I mean, they value him at around sort of 3.5 million, which is, I guess you're thinking if he
Is
could
that
go to...
expensive? Is that too expensive, Steve?
I mean, not really when you consider how much to remind me how much he actually came for in the first place.
He came for a reported 12, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good purchase for 3.5 million for someone, but it's just, is he going to move? Yeah, it's a gamble, and you look at his probably stats, and they haven't been that great. He did okay in Mexico when he went back, but nothing spectacular. Obviously, missed out on making the World Cup squad. It's not a very sellable asset. But this is the same conversation we had, 18 months ago when he was there. They just can't seem to get any firm interest in him. They'd love to get him off the books, I think, but it's not possible. But now with Higuain not there, could it be his time to flourish? You never know. That'd be probably in the back of the coaching staff's mind. There's a player in there, but was he a bit sort of, was he a bit diluted with Higuain there? It was too difficult. It was well documented that they, found it difficult to play with each other. He's not there now. So, but would you pin all your hopes on Pizarro to sort of help you do better than last season? It's a bit doubtful, isn't it?
I am shaking my head. Sorry, Jose. I'm shaking my head at what Steve just said, especially the beginning part where he just said, "Oh yeah, there's got to be someone that would take him on for 3.5 million." Because every other podcast that we have had discussions about Pizarro, you have been his biggest critic on here, his absolute biggest critic. And I'm not saying it's been unwarranted. But you have never been that full of praise for Pizarro. And now you're saying that he's worth 3.5 million. I cannot believe he's not worth 3.5 million.
I'm talking about like a team in like the English Championship, like below the Premier League, that are looking to get promotion. Would they take a chance with 3 million, the January transfer window, to buy a former Mexican international player? I mean,
no,
maybe.
No, absolutely not. No way. Pizarro has literally, like Jose said, declined from when he arrived to South Florida to now. His career has gone from rising to slumping. He was on the up. The decision to go to Inter Miami in 2020 was criticized in Mexico. Pundits, a lot of fans thought he should have gone to Europe or held out and stayed in Mexico. That move to the MLS, although it was probably very lucrative for him, it was a step back, or at best a step laterally from a sporting aspect. And since then, his flame has fluttered and diminished. And he has not been the same player. He did not make the World Cup roster for Mexico. He's not wanted by Inter Miami. Clearly, he's not wanted. But he very well may be here. You did bring up a very good point that Gonzalo Higuain is no longer on the team. And clearly, anyone that saw the games in 2021 saw that Pizarro and Higuain just were having chemistry issues on the field. Like taking up the same spaces, both trying to get on the ball. They just couldn't click. They couldn't click, which led to Pizarro obviously being loaned out in 2022.
And there could be a concern as well within the coaching staff of something like that happening again, which, it wouldn't be ideal because it seems like, the locker room is in very good shape at the moment. So, I think there are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, but also, if you want to be positive about the whole situation, Pizarro has something to prove, right, in MLS. And I think there's talent there, but I think it's about the mindset for him. If it's ready to go, if he gets an opportunity during preseason and shows something different, shows some signs, then Inter Miami might not have an option, but they just have to keep him under the roster. And if you want to settle for 3.5, and he gets off to a good start, then you might get a little bit more. Even within MLS, you would think like other teams where the Mexican market is big. It is not here in South Florida. Rodolfo Pizarro, if you go to Houston, if you go to Austin, if you go to LA, and you go to a stadium, everybody knows who Rodolfo Pizarro is. If you go here to, any other stadium, even Inter Miami, people might not know who he is. So he has a value as well within, the marketing side of things. So,
Jose,
it,
is he worth
that's part of this.
3.5? Is he worth 3.5 million in
No,
your
not right
opinion?
now. Not right now. Not right now.
What is he
Not
worth
right now.
in your opinion? And I know you're not a scout, I know you're not a general manager, but in your opinion, throw a number out there. What is he worth?
I'll probably give you 2.
I would go with that. 2 million more or less.
Yeah,
2 million more or
I'll
less.
give you 2. Yeah, I'll give you 2, just because it's a gamble, man. I mean, let's be serious here. It's a gamble. You don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know what you're gonna get, and obviously, Inter Miami wants to get rid of him, right? So that's part of the negotiation
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, Jose. And let's listen
So
to what Chris Henderson said to you last year at the end of season press conference when you asked him about Rodolfo Pizarro.
We're in conversations with Pizarro and his agent and Monterrey, where he has been on loan and he is counted as a DP for us this year. So those conversations are ongoing. There could be a knock-on effect on DP. So we're trying to take it step by step. And then be able to make the next move after that. We are looking and working. The recruitment staff, our scouts, are looking at options all over the world. We get linked with big names. We want to bring in characters and personalities that fit what we're building, and will come in and fit the core players that we're continuing to go forward with. So the work is going on, and research is going on, and conversations are going on every day.
If Inter Miami had wanted him back from the first place after his loan expired, they could have, let's say, theoretically, hypothetically, they could have said, all right, Gonzalo Higuain's retired, we can bring Pizarro back. But when Chris Henderson says we're in negotiations, then clearly they're open to getting rid of him permanently, because it was just a loan deal. Again, there was a buy option. That was not triggered. So Inter Miami could just outright keep Pizarro if they wanted to. If they're in negotiations, it's because they're open to not keeping him around. I think it's a very big dilemma for the team. I think it's something that has to be resolved at some point in this preseason, because if you keep him on the roster, how do you build the rest of the roster? Like, what other type of DPs do you bring? Because let's think about positionally on the field. Where do you play Pizarro? Are you going to play him as the 10, as the one that has to be the fulcrum of the attack, the one that's pulling the strings? Is he that type of player for you? Do you play him out on the wing, even though he's not a traditional winger, doesn't necessarily have the the speed or the pace? Where do you play him? And how do you bring in 2 other DPs to play with him or around him, or however you go about it? I think it's a very big dilemma. I think it's something that absolutely Inter Miami needs to resolve sooner rather than later. What other options? They could buy him outright. They have, MLS teams have a 1 buyout option per season, so they could do that, but that would be taking a pretty big hit, which they don't seem like they want to do. Maybe ownership doesn't want to do. They could try to find a suitor for him in MLS, but I don't agree with you, Jose, that other teams in MLS would take him, because they'd have to pay for a chunk of his salary, and I just don't see teams in MLS where there's a salary budget really being open to doing that for a player that, yes, from a marketing standpoint, might put some butts in seats, although, again, even now, does he have that much allure as a borderline Mexican international that didn't make the World Cup team? I don't know. I don't think so.
Mexican fans are faithful, and as much as they probably don't want him back in Monterrey, I'm sure there's people that might want him back in Chivas, and just because they believe in him, and that's a player that they like, and the Mexican connection.
Hey, I said MLS. I said MLS because you said MLS. There might be another team marketing wise, but you said MLS. So I was just.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there might be something to it. I mean, if you're asking for 3.5, then I'm thinking, okay, how can I get those 3.5 back? Okay, he's worth it probably 2 when it comes to football terms. So where am I getting the other 1.5? And that's what I'm thinking. That's the only way to go. I mean, I'm just trying to think of ways.
You're trying to get creative. You're trying to get creative. Yeah, you're trying to get creative, but positionally, because look, let's try to paint a full picture, because it's true that when he did not play with Higuain, before Higuain arrived in 2020, Pizarro was the face of the franchise. He was the biggest star attraction. He was the player that was leading the attack. Scored some goals, got some assists, was heavily involved, and got a whole lot of touches. Once Higuain came, things completely changed, which we've already talked about in detail a little bit here and over the course of the last couple of years. If he stays on the roster, maybe he does play better. Maybe he buys into what Phil Neville is selling with this younger team, and maybe he proves more effective like he did early on in 2020 during that first half of that COVID-impacted season. Maybe. Regardless, I go back to you, Steve, and then I want to hear Jose as well. Positionally, where do you play Rodolfo Pizarro? Where do you think he is best suited?
Yeah, I mean, we're going. It's like we're in a time machine. We've gone back sort of 3 years.
I know you're loving it. I know you're loving it.
Same conversations. I mean, he was quite good, wasn't he? And he played on the sort of the left hand side of like a front three, but I don't know. I mean, it's a massive headache having him back. But most importantly, they're going to have to replace Higuain. Those goals they're going to have to be replaced. And so, I guess in the back of their mind also they looked at would this guy be able to play with Pizarro potentially? I mean, he's there, isn't he? And they were still paying his wages a bit when he was in Mexico, and they're kind of stuck with him really. So unless they can sort something out, they're going to have to sort of solve the problems.
Jose, positionally, if Pizarro sticks around, where do you see him playing, or where would you play him? In this team, with this roster, with this younger group that, its focus, at least last year, was on speed, down the wings, with Lassiter, with Yedlin. You know the makeup of the team. And things haven't changed all that much. So where would he fit in this team? Is he even a starter on this team? Is he come off the bench? Where do you see Pizarro fitting in with this team if Inter Miami cannot get rid of him?
I would give him an opportunity as a 10. I think that's the only way to go here, because if you put him through the wings, I don't think he's fast enough for this league. He's built as well. He's going to run into, big right backs and left backs, whether you put him on the right or on the left. So I think he's good with the ball. So I would give him an opportunity more like an Alejandro Pozuelos last year. I'm not saying that it will be successful, but I think that's the only way to go with him at this point, because if you put him next to Gregory or Mota, I think that's too big a gamble there, because defensively you're going to be limited. In the middle, he's not good defensively. He's an offensive player. And that's what I would do. But, I think that's a roadblock for players like Bryce Duke as well. So it's a very complicated situation. But to answer your question, I will give him an opportunity as a 10 in preseason. If it looks good, then you go from there.
I agree with you that I think if he sticks around, that's where they'll give him a look, and where they should give him a look. Because like Steve mentioned, and I agree fully, although Steve said that he thinks Pizarro had some good games out there on the left, I don't really agree with that overall, but he's a 10. If he's going to cut it in any position in MLS, it's as a 10, because he doesn't have the speed to play on the wing. He's not the most vertical player, and Inter Miami clearly wants their wingers to get forward and bomb forward and stretch the opposing back line by getting in behind. Pizarro's more of a player that likes to get his touches in. I've been critical of him at times because it feels like he dribbles in a small square just amongst himself sometimes, and doesn't keep the ball flowing and going. So I think the 10, you would probably have to try him there and see if that works out, because I just don't see anywhere else. I agree. I don't think you can play him as an 8. Don't think you can play him on the wing. It's not necessarily a great crosser of the ball. So, 10 would have to be it. That obviously would impact whether you sign a 10 if you're Inter Miami, but I think that's the only spot that could potentially work out at all positively. So we'll see how it goes for Inter Miami. That's something Chris Henderson, I'm sure, is hard at work about or at. So we'll see if he sticks around for the long haul or if the Pizarro problem will linger over the course of 2023. It's early. We're in the first week of January, so plenty of time to see how that all plays out. Let's talk quickly about another player who, well, he was linked during the World Cup as having signed a deal to come to Inter Miami. It was the latest in so many reports that we've seen like this over the last few years. We are, of course, talking about the World Cup winner and the player who I will now say, and I was never ever his staunchest defender, but who I think is now officially the greatest of all time. We're talking about Leo Messi. There were reports saying he was coming. Then there were reports saying he's not coming. Then there were reports saying he's likely to stick around with PSG for at least another year. Steve, what can you tell us? What do you know about Lionel Messi to Miami? Is that pretty much done now? Is there no chance of that? Very little chance of that? Big chance of that? Where do things stand?
No, I mean, there's still a chance it will happen. Will it happen? You know, he's going to sign another. Sounds like he's going to sign another year with Paris. I think he will. World Cup just moved that any potential move now to MLS sort of out of the question, really. I think, you know, his value, you know, stock rose with that, and, you know, even people inside the club sort of, even though they admit they wanted him, as the sort of World Cup went on, it looked like he was going to win it. They kind of just felt that this probably wasn't going to happen right now, even though they've made the moves and, you know, they know that he's interested. He's got the place in Miami and everything like that. It was maybe a season too early for it to happen. MLS bosses and Don Garber, the commissioner, would have loved it. They would have loved it. You know, MLS is starting up a new TV deal, which I guess we'll get into at some point in the future. But, you know, from next season, so that would have been a huge coup for them. Do I think it happened now? No. Do I think it will happen in the future? Yes, at some point. But you know, Messi looks like he's still full of beans, like he's 25 years old. So he's probably still got a few seasons left in him. So it will happen. I don't think it's going to happen right now, which is a shame. And, you know, Ronaldo was another one that they were sort of offered, and, you know, Beckham had made some inquiries, but I think they dodged a bullet. He's gone to a club in Saudi Arabia now. I thought that would have been a bad fit. There would have been too much drama and too much hysteria over it, and there'd be hysteria about Messi. But I think Ronaldo just, you know, his star has fallen a little bit, and I don't think that would have been a good move. So I think they maybe dodged a bullet there. But with Messi, just wait and see. But I'd be surprised if he doesn't sign on, at least for another season in Paris, especially after what happened in Qatar.
If he signs on in Paris, I won't say it's over, but I think the dream is on life support, just because Messi will be turning 36 this summer. So if he signs for another year, you're not getting him if you're Inter Miami until he's 37. And would you take him at 37? Absolutely, just because of who he is. Again, for me, he's officially, as the kids say, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. So would you take him at 37? Yeah, most likely. But you're obviously getting him at a more advanced age where physically he's going to be not what he was. And, of course, then there's the motivation factor. After winning a Copa America, after winning a World Cup, and you're adding another year onto that, seeing what he does with PSG, you know, what can you realistically get out of him at 37? You know, besides marketing. Obviously, the marketing side would be fantastic and all that, but on the field, you know, you'd have to see exactly what you'd get out of him. Jose, what are your thoughts?
Completely agree with Steve. I think, you know, with him winning the World Cup, I think that takes him out of the conversation within the MLS landscape. I think, you know, the league is not big enough at this point to lure just a world champion of his caliber. I think, you know, it's unfortunate because, you know, at some point it did feel like, you know, it was getting closer and closer. But with him winning the World Cup, I think we all understood, okay, it's not going to happen. And just a few days later, I think the report came out about him staying with PSG for one more year. So I don't know. I think you have to move away from that if you're Inter Miami. With all the problems brought by the sanctions, I think when you're just about to get done with that, it's about really fulfilling the promise, right, of having a winning team in South Florida, and I think you can do that without Messi. And the other thing as well, just watching Cristiano Ronaldo this morning, or early afternoon, I think, that might make Messi look for something similar for his next contract. He's obviously a world champion, and he considers to be himself to be along the same lines with Cristiano Ronaldo, maybe even bigger than that. So why would he settle for less? So if MLS is ready to take that step, then he might come. But if not, I'm sure, Saudi Arabia will be ready to do something similar for him as well.
Okay. Well then, one more player we can talk about, though it's not Inter Miami related, but there's another World Cup participant that is in talks with MLS. Steve, what do you know about that?
Yeah, Oliver Giroud, French international striker at AC Milan, has been speaking to MLS clubs, but told that Miami on in the running for him. So, that he would imagine if they'd signed Giroud, 36, but, know that he definitely scored goals in MLS. That could potentially replace the goal output from Higuain. And I'd imagine that Giroud Pizarro sort of pivot. It'd be glorious. It'd be amazing. What a deal. But, having a target man like that in experience, I think that would have been interesting, wouldn't it, if they've got him? But I'm told that he's not on their radar. So, but interestingly, is interested in the move to the US.
Have you guys forgotten about Leonardo Campana? Has everyone forgotten that he is a striker that's set to return to Inter Miami by all accounts, whether it's on a DP deal or not?
That he missed 15 games.
Sure, but do we really think they're going to bring in another striker to compete with Leonardo Campana for the starting striker role? If it was any other league in the world, sure, no problem. But you have a salary cap here. You have a budget here. For them to bring Campana back, they have to trigger the buy option in the loan deal they had with Wolves for him. So that's going to cost them some money. Could make him a DP depending on what numbers work out. The fact that has not been announced yet, maybe they're still putting the finishing touches on that. But regardless, you guys think Inter Miami would go DP striker on top of bringing Campana back? Yes?
Well, just remember how good Higuain was at the end and how much they depended on him. Without him, the end of the season would have really sort of just gone, wouldn't it? So, I don't know. Yeah, he's left a massive hole. Yeah, Campana was great, but struggled with injury, didn't he, towards the back end of the season, and then that was when Higuain really came to the fore, and he was the main man, wasn't he? He dragged them through. So he needs to be replaced.
So you're saying that yes, you see them potentially bringing in a DP striker in addition to Campana?
I think so, for sure, yeah.
Jose?
Yeah, I think if there's a high caliber player and he's a number 9, and you really have an opportunity of bringing him in, I think that they'll do that. I think, you need that quality in MLS, that reality. And I think this is something that maybe, the coaching staff learned in 2022 is that in MLS you win by scoring, not by planning on how to defend day in and day out. You really have to score, and you just have to live with the fact that, yes, you're going to allow 2 or 3 goals per game, but if you score 4, then that's okay. And that's MLS. You invest in attacking players. And that's the reality of the league right now.
Well, yeah, that's the formula the league has always done, because that's what they believe is a formula for exciting fans. Just having a lot of good attacking play that leads to goals, even though clearly the defending is not up to snuff. You can have your opinion on that, but I have a hard time seeing them going for a DP striker in addition to Campana. I think they will bank on Campana to be the guy. Obviously, he's not going to, or you can't expect him to produce the type of moments of magic like Higuain did last year on a consistent basis, because he's not that type of player. He is a good finisher, like he showed, especially during that first half of last season before the injuries and before his form dipped a little bit. But I would bank on them planning for him to be the starting striker and then having a DP number 10, probably not Pizarro though, pulling the strings behind him, and the number 10 being the player that really lifts the tide, that really raises everybody's level. That's just how I would think they would go about it. Not necessarily bringing in another striker, because if you bring another striker, Campana now has less playing time. And again, competition's not a bad thing, but this is MLS. You have a salary budget, and Inter Miami has cap constraints. So can you afford to do that? Can you afford to put that much money into one position when probably only one of them is going to start on a regular basis? I don't see that happening. I think Campana will be the 9. I think they're looking for other attacking pieces to build around him. Though, I'll say this, and then Jose, I know you've got something there. There are a lot of games this year. There is a lot of competition across all MLS and across Inter Miami's agenda in 2023. And if you're an Inter Miami fan, you should be thrilled to hear that, because there's going to be games coming at a more frequent pace than ever before. Because not only is there a 34-game regular season, not only is there US Open Cup, there's also now another competition that Inter Miami will be in, Leagues Cup. And Inter Miami will partake in that tournament in the summer. So there's going to be a lot of games, and there's going to be a need for rotation and players getting minutes. Again, just because of the MLS salary cap and the structure, I don't necessarily think, even with that you're going to be able to afford to have 2 DP strikers or 2 players like that on the roster. I just don't see it happening unless they start playing with 2 strikers on a consistent basis. But, I mean, that could be the argument, or that could be some of the thought process. There's a lot of games. There's going to need to be a rotation at some point. But I think you're better suited deploying DPs in other spots and having Campana as your number 9 if that's who you've chosen for this season and beyond. Jose, finish your thoughts there, and we'll wrap up this segment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's you can also not rely on a lower level number 9 when Campana is not available. I mean, if
Corentin Jean.
Well, what have you seen from him that makes you think he's a solid 9 or somebody to replace Campana? I mean,
I don't. But clearly the team, when they signed him, they said he can play on the wing, he can play as a 9. Now, obviously, last year he got hurt, and he didn't show a whole lot. But I imagine that I said that last year when they signed him. That long term, they probably saw him as a backup number 9.
All I'm saying is that, if there's an opportunity at getting a solid number 9, then you go for it. You just go for it. If not, then, if the plan is to get a 10 as a DP, then that's good. That's good too.
Solid or great?
It's great. I think
solid
it
or
works.
Great? Solid number 9 or great number 9?
No, if it's a great number 9, then you go for it.
Sure, I agree with that. But if it's a solid number 9, you still think that you would go for it, or they should go for it? I don't.
I don't know. You're gonna have to give me names for me to get.
I don't know. I don't know what you think is solid.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. I don't know what you think is solid. So, I think Campana's solid.
Yeah, but let's just put it this way: if you can get something better than Campana, and obviously that would be a DP player,
how much better?
You go for it.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Better. Higuain. You remember last year when you thought Higuain was done? Then he proved otherwise. Then there are players out there that might fall into that category. So, but yeah, I mean, if you go
you'd
for
be hurting yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot, Jose. You're shooting yourself in the foot. Not you. I'm saying Inter Miami if they do that, because now you've got another player that is going to be playing ahead of Campana, and that's going to limit his development because he's not going to be getting naturally as many minutes as if there's another option out there that could unseat him from the starting spot. So not only do you hurt Campana's development potentially. You also hurt his stock, which I imagine Inter Miami, in their eyes, they're like, okay, we want to sell Campana at some point down the road. He's still very young, relatively speaking. So 2-3 years of good production, you could sell him for a good fee.
This is the beauty of preseason, because everybody's available, nobody's gonna get injured, and then you start thinking, I have a 9, so I don't have for another 9. And then the season starts, and injuries start coming, and they can come very early, and then you start thinking, oh, okay, so now what? Well, that's the game. So I'm just saying, DPs, if you have the opportunity to get players at a very high level, you just have to go for it. It doesn't, at least right now, Inter Miami, with basically no DPs, you need to make sure you have top quality in the DPs that you're going to sign. That's my take.
Oh, absolutely. If they can find a high level, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But just above Campana or at his level, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. But anyway, all right. Let's leave it there for now. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back, do a very short Q&A. We'll do one question, but we have a couple other things to talk about regarding Inter Miami, so we'll do that after this. Everybody, so let's quickly put a bow on this pod, the first of 2023. Let's start by talking about another one of Steve Brenner's favorite topics, the jersey. There's a new jersey, or images of the apparent new jersey, that will be unveiled in the coming weeks. Images have surfaced online. You can find them at Miami Total Futbol's Instagram page. It's very similar to the La Palma secondary kit that's been used over the last 2 years. It's predominantly black. It's got pink on it, although it's a bit of a brighter or hotter or bolder pink. It has lines down the side in the torso area, and it has some swirls that are in like the same like black, grayish black color that it doesn't really pop out at you when you're looking at the jersey from afar, but when you're up close, you can notice it a little more. It's just a detail. Do you guys like the jersey? Is it too safe? Did they play it too similar to what La Palma was? If this is the jersey, I will start with Jose because I know Steve's not a huge jersey guy.
Well, yeah, I don't think. I think it's just okay. I mean, it's okay. I'll feel better if I get it for free in the media game, which I'm already advocating for. It's never too late.
You've begun your preseason preparation?
Yeah, already. Nah, not really. But maybe on Monday I'll start. So, yeah, I think it's just okay. I'm not crazy about it.
I don't like the monochrome crest. That's just my thing across any jersey. I don't like a monochrome crest. The crest that just has one solid color as opposed to the actual colors of the crest. Not a huge fan of that. And this jersey apparently has that. I do like that it has the new Adidas logo without the Adidas name on it. It just has the 3 lines, a bit bigger, a bit bolder. I do like that, but they look clearly. It looks like they're going for tradition in terms of their color scheme. So they want black and they want pink. I don't have a problem with that. I just think it could have been executed a little bit better here. I think you know what? We have to see the whole look. We have to see if this is actually the jersey. I think it is, just based on the images we've seen and the amount of them. If they wore this with pink shorts, I think, all right, it looks way better. No, what? No, it looks way better, and you've got a home run on your hands. And just because of the overall aesthetic. I still think the jersey itself could be better, but black and pink, we need to see that. That would be, I think, chef's kiss. Steve,
I quite like it. I mean, I like the sort of black and the pink sort of cut. It's yeah. I think, like you say, if they can mix it up with the pink shorts, I think that looks pretty cool. Don't you think?
I do. Jose clearly does not. Okay. Well, let's move on. We talked about Blaise Matuidi. At least we name dropped him earlier in the podcast. He officially announced his retirement the end of an accomplished career, another DP from Inter Miami's initial season, that finally that chapter is closed. Even though last year he was an ambassador, he wasn't on the roster, yada, 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 he was still around. Now, that's no longer the case. How do you look back on Blaise Matuidi's time with Inter Miami? We'll start with Steve, because compared to Higuain finished on a high, scoring goals, helping the team make it to the playoffs. He ended his career on a relatively positive note, whereas Matuidi didn't even play this final season. So how do you look back on Matuidi's stint in South Florida?
Blaise, Rodolfo, it's like we're getting the band back together, isn't it? Get Diego Alonso. I know you shed a tear when Diego Alonso went out in the World Cup. Let's get them all back. Paul McDonough, I'm sure he's served his band.
I'm actually wearing baby blue shirts, so yeah.
Matuidi was a strange one, wasn't it? He had a few moments where he looked good. Legs have he wasn't the same player, was he? He wasn't the same player that won the World Cup in 2018. And then, of course, we had all the sort of financial problems and all that sort of hoo-ha and the weirdness of him sort of still being around but not being on the team, and all of it's strange. And of course, it was his transfer, wasn't it, that caused him all the problems as well. So wasn't the best end to his career. When he had a great career though, didn't he? Just sort of went out on a bit of a bum note, really. But he did well a few games, but just it wasn't enough, was it, really?
No, definitely not. I agree. Very accomplished career, World Cup winner, a lot accomplished there. Played at the high level, at a high level, the highest level for so long for club and country. And his career does end on a whimper. A bit sad, really, that it goes out like it does, with him not even being wanted, him being surplus to requirements, and essentially being told, you're not playing for us anymore, and becoming an ambassador of sorts. However, Inter Miami managed to make that work. But anyway, Jose, quickly, your thoughts on Blaise Matuidi's stint with Inter Miami. Is it an eyesore for the Frenchman to finish his career in the way that he did, or was it?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. I think it was, the decision to come to MLS, it was not a good one. It was not good for him. It was not good for the team. I think, physically the league was just too much for him towards the end of his career. Maybe if he was able to come, maybe 2 or 3 years before the time he did, then, things might have been a little bit different for him. But, it wasn't the right setup for him here in Inter Miami as well, with the weather and the way the team was playing at the moment, was struggling to find an identity on the field. And, it just didn't work out. Very unfortunate situation at the end. But, I'm sure he's happy with the career he had. And, there's nothing to feel. You make bad decisions every day. So, it happened at the end of the career. And, it is what it is. I think, overall, he should be happy with what he was able to accomplish.
Especially if, like Steve and I have joked, he has this incredible boat somewhere here.
He's sailing off into the sunset right now as we speak.
Yeah. We've joked about that. If you've missed that joke from previous pods, well, yeah, it's just an inside joke Steve and I have had with listeners from 2 seasons ago plus. So, all right, let's do a quick Q&A. One question comes from Jeffrey Poole. I'm curious your thoughts on the kids. Which of the homegrown signings do you think will truly get a run with the team in 2023? Very good question. Very good question. Because Inter Miami wants to do better than they did in 2022 in terms of the standings, the final standings. So they'll be wanting to win. They're not necessarily looking to prioritize development, although they'll say that publicly. So be curious to see how Phil Neville approaches that. But I'll go back to you, Jose, quickly. Just a name. Who do you think will get that run out?
Just overall in the entire roster, or are you talking about the draft?
Young players, homegrown players.
Young player?
You're talking we're talking Ascona, we're talking Noah Allen, we're talking...
Yeah, I think... No, I was thinking
Benjamin Camachi.
No, I think Noah Allen. Noah Allen should be a player that, he should fight for an opportunity. If he worked on, during the offseason, players have a responsibility to do something extra work on something in the development, especially if you're early in your career like Noah Allen is, and I think he could challenge a starting spot. So I think Noah Allen should be the guy to watch.
Steve, any name stick out to you?
Not really. Only just off the back of what Jose said. I mean, with someone like Noah Allen as well. You know, he had good experience last season as a kid coming through, so he's got that in the bank. I think it's important for guys of that age just to try and get some games under their belt.
I would agree with you guys. I think Noah Allen is the player most likely to get a run with the first team. Someone that I would keep an eye on, because Benjamin Cromachi, while I think the team internally is very, very high on him, and from everything I hear, obviously they rate him very, very much, he's still very, very young. He's 17. Now he's with Argentina's under-20 national team, and he's getting pretty good experience at a young age. But just picking up the little bits and pieces of what Chris Henderson said when they announced the signing of Benjamin Cromachi, he said, he needs a lot of hard work. That's the next step for him in his development. It's obviously he's a longer-term project, or at least that's my interpretation of what I heard when that announcement or when that signing was made. So out of the bunch, I think Noah Allen is the one that could be closest to, like Costa said, getting a starting spot. Does he get it? Be up to him and how the season plays out, how the other left backs do. Kieran Gibbs is still on the roster, interestingly enough. So I think Noah Allen could be the one that gets a good run. It'll be up to him to deliver and show what he's got and earn more minutes. So I don't know. I don't know if I see Edison Ascona getting a whole lot of playing time this year. There's more games, so maybe he'll have a little bit more opportunity, but I just see a lot of options ahead of him. I also not really sure what his best position is at the MLS level. Is it a 10? Is he on the wing? It's interesting because he's now starting to get a little bit older. He's 19 now. He needs to start finding some playing time a little bit more consistently. So we'll see what happens with Edison Ascona as well. But all right, that'll do it for the Q&A session. And do you guys want to do final thoughts, or should we just end the show there? I think we should end the show there so we can make good on our promise of trying to keep the show as close as possible. Unless you want to talk about Steve's reactions at the Irish pub in Hollywood during England versus France.
It's an emotional game. What can you say? I went in confident that we were going to win the World Cup. You just got to believe. I don't blame your patriotism. I don't blame your patriotism. You absolutely understand it. If that was Peru, you would have been doing exactly the same thing.
I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. This is what we'll talk about here to wrap up the show. This will serve as our final thought. Jose, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you think you agree with me or you don't. Is England, generally speaking, not necessarily this England of the last 3, 4, 5 years, but is England, generally speaking, overrated?
I would say yes.
Hold on. How can a team that won one trophy ever be overrated?
I would say this. Coming into Qatar,
I'm smiling ear to ear.
They had a very good team. And I think, the expectations were right. I mean, they were supposed to, fight for the title. But generally, yes. England always goes into the tournaments thinking they can win it all. And sometimes they're just not even close. So I would say that. I put it that way.
Many times they've not been close, but definitely the last few years we've had our best team for a while, really. And they played well against France, just missed the penalty. That was...
They were playing. They did not play poorly, but they were never in front. They were never in front in that game.
Yeah, so they still played well.
Okay, France. Okay, we're not going to dive into a whole X's and O's of that game, but that first half, France literally just let England have the ball and was looking to counter, and they took the lead. And then the onus was on England, and England picked it up in the second half and tied the game. Then France went ahead. Then England could have tied it with Harry Kane's penalty kick. Could have tied it. That doesn't mean they would have won it. They could have tied it.
No.
So you were hell bent afterwards of saying, "Oh no, if he scores, I was like, they would have tied the game. They wouldn't have won the game. They would have tied the game, and anything could have happened after that. England never led in that game, and the onus was on them to have the ball and look to attack. So because they were trailing for much of the match, so I do think this team is probably the most talented team they've had in a good few years or recent memory. But I'm of the firm belief, Steve. I'm sorry. You're not debating as hard as you were that day because that day you had a few beers, but your patriotism was shining through. Which, hey, again, I don't blame you for it. But generally speaking, they're a bit overrated. It's always the belief that they should be fighting for the World Cup trophy. Well,
they should. I mean, they should.
Based off what? History
based
has shown
on the quality of the team they've got.
No. See, that's where the overratedness comes in. That's where the overrated English. I don't know if it's a mentality, but the English press or whatever. But the players are definitely overrated.
I'll tell you what it is. They have the number one league in the world, and that's why you always think, okay, if we have the number one league in the world, then we should compete for the World Cup title every single time. Problem is, best players in the number one league in the world are not playing for England.
True.
And that's what it is. It's hard to understand that, yes, you have the best league in the world, but no, you're not going to compete for every single title.
Well, they've started producing better players, but when Peru and Honduras get to the World Cup in 2026, we can talk again, guys. We can talk again. So let's let's keep that conversation going. But good luck.
Nice.
We'll see you there.
Okay.
Nice.
Close his mic.
Nice. No, hey, listen. England's won one World Cup. Awesome that they've done that. They're one of 9-10 countries that have ever won a World Cup. So, but you have to consistently prove yourself. You don't just live on your past. You don't just live on you were good 1 point and you won a trophy at 1 point. You have to consistently prove yourself. England has not won a trophy since then. So
since 1966, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how they could generally consistently considered favorites. That's all. That's my point. Not this group.
They haven't been consistently considered favorites. They haven't. It's not true.
I don't know about that.
Mate.
I don't know about that.
That's
Even you were arguing with me that day about how no, if you're English, you have to expect the final because that's who we are. Okay, anyway, all right.
Yeah, 100%. That's fair enough.
No. Disagree. I mean, I think you're contradicting yourself. But okay, we'll leave it there. We'll let the listeners decide what they think about England and their perception out there.
All the listeners will agree with me for sure.
Yeah, it's just like Pizarro and that one debate we had way long ago. Okay, all right. Well, that does it for this week's show. We did more or less okay on our promise of 1 hour or so. So we'll leave it there. We'll try again next week once preseason is officially underway for Inter Miami. Once we've gotten to talk to or speak to some of the protagonists about what's coming in 2023. So for Steve El Primo Brenner and for Island Jose, aka Jose Armando, my name is Franco Panizo. You have been listening to Miami Total Futbol Radio.